two items that like Mike mentioned is kind of interesting, and I wanted to bring it up before I talk about what I wanted to say. What users want from the DNS? I think that's a very, very interesting question. I think one of the things that when you ask all of the people, anytime you ask, the last thing that anybody would want are new TLDs. But I think one of the things that I want to talk about is new TLDs, because that is seemingly going to be a very important part of a very important change and development in the domain industry, if you will, for the next year or so. And the other part is separation of economic and non-economic aspects of ICANN. I think it's definitely a very good suggestion, but somehow I think most of the economic aspects have a lot of non-economic repercussions. So it's, if we can actually divorce them, it would be very, very interesting. And I think registries and registrars, that's sort of like the domain industry, would appreciate that, and at least conceptually, ICANN would be moving faster in many respects. So I want to talk about two areas that I think is going to make a lot of changes, sort of visible changes to users around the world. One is new TLDs, new ccTLDs, and this seems to be a very hotly discussed issue for the last few years at ICANN. In fact, there are people who believe that the whole reason for ICANN's existence is to create new ccTLDs, so that to create competition with ComNet.org. So, and the other part I want to talk about, which is also new TLDs, but with a slightly different twist, which is new IDN TLDs, internationalized domains, multilingual TLDs, which is to a lot of people for the rest of the world, or really, to get out of this Anglo-centric internet. I think it's. I'll come back to that a little bit in a little bit, but I think some of it is a little bit overrated, but it is still an important part, because it is still a fundamental change in terms of how people view the DNS, or how the domain name works or doesn't work on the internet. So new TLDs, I think that's since its inception. Actually, don't know whether it's at the inception or when did we decided that it would be all the ccTLDs and gTLDs, but very early on, it was the country code top-level domains, and then a very limited set of what is called generic top-level domains. I guess was the nomenclature back then already created, or it was created later?
No, it was there at the beginning
of
ICANN.
So, beginning of ICANN, but when Paul...
There was a UN list of country codes, and
so
the only discussion we had was, should we use 2 or 3 letter ones?
That's right.
I lost it. Because basically the argument was, hey, we don't want to get in the business of deciding who a country is, and we know that there's lots of countries that are going to come along and say, we will run our own affairs, and we would say, oh, here's your 2 letters, go away. Which was, it was just a very easy way to some extent, subvert people in, well, here it is, now you've got to manage it. And avoid the issue about, we own all of the names in X.
And just for the historical record, .uk was well established even before that.
No, well, I think I'll get back to the 2-character thing and the ccTLD, but I think my point that I want to make was we had about 250 or so TLDs, today, but what is being discussed actually in the industry today is by the end of this year or next year, depending on the speed of ICANN, we may be looking at hundreds of new TLDs. We're talking about maybe hundreds, or even there are predictions that it may go to 1,000, well, at least applications for new TLDs. So it will be fundamental. It will bring some fundamental change in how the public views the whole domain system. So, and with that brings, I think, one element of which also have a certain big impact in terms of why it took so long, and that is this whole concept of a startup phase of a new top-level domain. So who gets to have the beachside, penthouse, nice real estate, and how that is being dealt with? I think what is called in the industry terms sunrise period, how that is handled. I think that has always been a very highly debated issue. One thing I wanted to bring up is that the whole concept of sunrise has really sort of evolved quite a bit over the years, and I'd like to I'm happy, I guess, to report .Asia, which is going through its sunrise process right now, has been relatively successful in one regard, and the only regard is that we have gotten high level of satisfaction from brand owners. And so what sort of, in fact, I'm pretty proud to say that in a recent survey, we got 100% of the intellectual property rights practitioners saying that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the .Asia sunrise. So what I really want to point out is that in the starting up of a TLD, it's not necessarily true that it has to wreak havoc. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a chaotic situation. There are ways to in which people feel generally comfortable with protection of rights and also still, leaving good real estate for the other parts of the market, if you will. The other part of the new GTLD, and we're talking about so many, I think, is really the marketability. Will they survive? Are we talking about that we generate 500 TLDs in the next 2 years, and then it's to see 300 of them fail? I think that is on a lot of people's mind. That's an issue, and also a big question. I guess it's also a million dollar question, if you can answer that, is will a world of many TLDs make .com more prominent, or will it reduce the sort of dominance of .com? That's sort of another question that is often asked when we talk about a lot of new GTLDs. And I wanted to, I just, earlier today was Paul mentioned, or was it last night, that Paul mentioned a very interesting story that says .com, when it was created because they thought nobody would use it. Right? So I thought
there was an argument about whether or not they should just be country codes as top-level TLDs, or other things. Could we try other things? And one of the persuasive points was, well, if it doesn't catch on, we can always delete it. Well, okay, nobody's going to use .com, so fine, we're out.
So I think that's a very interesting anecdote, and the other thing is in terms of the prominence of .com, it's only really just 10 years ago that most people wouldn't know about what .com really meant. So I guess that's sort of different types of perspective. Another area that I want to touch a little bit on is the market, and again on marketability. If you have so many TLDs, are there so many people who want to buy so many domain names, continue to buy like millions of domain names? That's kind of weird. But looking at I guess the whole industry growth, domain names usage, I think, is a very big aspect of it. It used to be a sort of like command line on the internet. It used to be you use it for navigation, use it to find resources. But then it grew to be like a vanity name. People wanted cool names, even geeks, I guess, all of us here pretty much are, and at that time thought it was cool. Cool names, that was the next phase of the DNS. And then it went into, I think, around 2000, year 2000, become brand protection or corporate identity. That became the big thing. Today, a very interesting market is sort of developing, which domain names are really being viewed as real estate and like retail outlets on the internet. So the more domain names you have, the more visitors you can bring in. How that works, that actually is interesting, because one of the things that I often hear people say, I mean, domain names will be, will be not very useful from, a few years from now. Everybody will be searching, but that's exactly the interesting part. What people are doing today with domain names is to increase the footprint of their own footprint on the internet, so that when you search, you end up at somebody's website more likely. And that is one of the reasons what is sort of pushing the volumes of growth on the internet for the domain name registrations today. So that I think would be fairly interesting, because when corporations, as they look into today, corporations are not really utilizing this, what a lot of people call this the long tail aspect of domain names, which the main domain name, and then you have many other domain names that bring your visitors to the main site. But once corporations start doing that, there could be a lot of domain names. If you take, like 20,000 companies around the world, multinationals, and times it by like just 50,000 or 100,000 domain names, each one owning, you're talking about 1 billion or 10 billion domain names to be registered in order to create that effect of a large footprint on the internet. So that sort of provides a little bit of a perspective on some of the things that are sort of happening on the industry today. Before I talk about the IDN side, I want to introduce a little bit the .Asia organization and why it's related with the IDNs. .Asia organization actually is a not-for-profit organization created from ccTLDs in the Asia region. And one of a very important, when it was created, a very important part was to try to create, to have it in multilingual characters, so .Asia in different languages in the TLD. So it's really one of the things that is very important for the region, very important for the Asia region, to have a full IDN experience, if you will. And again, speaking about perspective in time, I guess myself is somewhat a self-proclaimed pioneer of IDNs, and I've been working on it. I was looking at it for 10 years. I can't quite believe it, but it also means that it's 40% of the time, 40% of the 25 years, 10 years, we've been spent on trying to discuss how IDNs is going to be, and we are likely going to be seeing new top-level domains that are in different character set, maybe as soon as later this year. So I think that's going to be one of the areas that would be bring a fundamental change in terms of how the public views the domain name system. I often hear that if we don't get this together, we'll be too late. The internet is going to fracture and everything. bad is going to happen. I heard that 7 years ago. It didn't. We're still here. I heard it 5 years ago. Still here. But hopefully we are actually going to get it together, because I just heard this today also, that if we don't get it together this year, it's going to fracture. Maybe it will, but I don't know. I've been waiting for so many years by now. Now I want to talk about why I brought up the ccTLD issue when Paul was explaining it. One actually very interesting debate that is going on for IDN TLDs is, how do you define a ccTLD? How do you define a country code top-level domain once you move into an IDN area? Paul made it really easy at that time to say, these two character codes are, ccTLDs. You play with it, and we won't care about it. Well, we give it to you, and you have to run it, kind of thing. But going forward with IDNs, it is not necessarily going to be so easy that it's going to be 2-character code from some language script, and so all the 2-character ones, we just give it to you, and then the new GTLDs would be 3 characters onwards. That's highly unlikely going to happen. In fact, I can pretty much say that's not going to happen. At least that's not envisioned to happen later this year, and when new IDN TLDs are being introduced, especially IDN ccTLDs. So the question still remains. In fact, right now the industry is actively discussing, how do we identify ccTLDs in the IDN realm? Yeah, you can easily say, certain countries, their name and their script. But after, once you start doing a few, then you realize you hit a point where, how do you actually define it? Do we have a list handy, just like what we originally did, which there was an ISO list that listed all the countries and territories, but it doesn't seem like there is one or would be one very soon. Not only that, but also in the many languages. So let's say England, UK wants to have a Chinese top-level domain for UK. Who determines what the actual term is going to be, and how that's determined? I think those are some of the questions that people are grappling with, and will have a fairly significant impact on how the public sees the domain names in the next few years. One last item I wanted to talk about is a lot of people says that IDN is sort of like, I wouldn't say savior, but IDN is going to bring on the multilingual internet. I haven't worked on it for 10 years. So I have to say I don't really agree with that, because, and as you look at domain names are not websites. One domain name doesn't equal one website. But I still, when I pick up calls every day, there's still people, after registering a domain name, calls in and asks, "Where's my website?" Which, so I don't think IDNs will, be the be all for create all this multilingual content, because IDN will not make more web pages, but it does have a very important part, and I think a few people have already said that. I mean, what's in a name? A name is a symbol, and it's fortunately or unfortunately a very strikes a very sentimental core to most people using it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edmon. Now over to you, Dennis.